Story 1. Backstory, okay? So this isn't something that happened to me, but to my dad. This occurred when my dad was dating my mom, so I'm not in this story, nor are my sisters. My dad used to be a banker for a Switzerland-based bank in Dubai. The bank had events and games for their employees who achieved the highest sales, and my dad was one of them. The scam. That year, the company had arranged a trip to Las Vegas for their top employees, but the trip was canceled due to problems. The company, wanting to maintain the morale of the deserving employees, decided to hold some casino games in Dubai. Since gambling with real money is illegal in Dubai, the company created fake money to use instead. This fake money could later be traded in for real money or gifts. So, my dad and his coworkers played several games and ended up with a significant amount of fake money. A supervisor, who had more fake money than my dad and his coworkers, decided to help them. "Oh, hey," the supervisor greeted Dad. "Hello, is there something you need?" "Actually, I was wondering if you both," referring to my dad and the other coworker, "could give me all of your fake money." "Why would we do that?" "I don't know. Maybe because I am your supervisor." Dad, not wanting to lose his job, said, "I understand that, sir, but we worked hard to get this money." "All right, look, I already have the most money out of you and your coworker, so I thought that if we pooled our money and won a few more games, we would have a lot. I will split the money equally afterward." They both handed over their money, thinking it was a good idea and not wanting to lose their job. As the supervisor promised, he won a couple of games and ended up with a lot of money. The next day, the supervisor walked into the office with 2 brand new laptops. 2. This may not seem like a lot to some, but to my dad, who worked hard to become a banker, it was significant. Everybody congratulated the supervisor on the new computers, and nobody thought much about it, except my dad and his coworker who still hadn't received their share of the money. When they inquired about it, the supervisor just said, "What money?" and went back to work. Now, apparently, my dad says this was a good thing. Let me explain. There was another supervisor who watched the deceitful supervisor take money from helpless employees. Let's call this supervisor Joe. Do you remember that I said this was around the time when my dad was dating my mom? Joe was good friends with my mom's dad, my maternal grandfather. My grandfather started asking whether Dad was a good guy or not. Joe told my grandfather that he was a kind, straightforward type of guy, all based on my dad giving the supervisor the money. So, that worked out, but we still haven't given the supervisor his deserved revenge. The revenge. My dad made it his personal mission in life to ensure that the supervisor was fired. He reported to all the surrounding supervisors that this guy stole money from my dad and his coworkers and wasn't giving it back. Unfortunately, the other supervisors just sighed like this was normal. But my dad didn't stop. He took it to the highest representative of the branch he worked in, and the supervisor was promptly fired. Think it's over? Oh no. The supervisor had started working in an oil company, and my dad was still angry that he hadn't gotten his share of the money. In many countries, they take this seriously as fraud, which can result in a massive fine or even arrest. My dad told the boss of the supervisor to be careful as he was likely to commit fraud. And boom, the very next day, this dishonest person indeed committed fraud and was sent to jail with a massive fine. Story 2. So, I live in a small town in Michigan in the middle of nowhere, and our police force is very small, currently 10 active duty officers. I only recently started my duty as a police officer. I'm mostly stationed on the east side of the city, but I grew up on the west side. Not many people recognize me here, so I come across a lot of entitled people who don't know I'm a cop when I'm off duty or undercover. We get a lot of them near the end of the month in and around our shopping mall. So even in my off hours, I spend some time down there just in case there's an emergency. One day, I was doing some gift shopping for my friend's birthday when I heard a commotion at the front of the store. It didn't seem too major, but I decided I'd been shopping long enough and was curious anyway, so I made my way over to pay. I saw an entitled person in a heated debate with one of the young employees working there. I set myself up in the checkout line behind her and kept my hand near my phone in case I needed to text my on-duty friend. "Karen, I don't understand how you can be so clueless. Did you even graduate high school? I have these coupons that cover this and that. Also, this is 50% off, so my total should be this and not that." Employee: "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I told you that coupon is expired, and even with the valid coupons, you can't use 2 on the same purchase." Karen, I demand to see your manager. Employee, I'm sorry, she's out at the moment. If you would like to wait for her, I can hold your items for you. Karen, this is unacceptable. I have places to be. Just give me this for free. Employee, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Karen, then get me an older employee who can. At this point, the woman had gone from yelling to screaming and had thrown her coupons at the cashier. Me, ma'am, please calm down. She's just a teenager, and throwing things is just plain childish. Karen, you don't talk to me that way. Missy, mind your own business. I shrugged and closed my mouth, but I told myself if she did anything more aggressive, I'd pull out my badge. They continued their back and forth, the entitled woman demanding the same things, and the girl apologizing and repeating her answer. Finally, when the woman realized she wasn't getting what she wanted, she grabbed her bags and sprinted for the door. I waited for her to cross the security rails, and as they went off, I caught up to her in a few seconds and tackled her to the ground. After reading her rights, I called my buddy, and he came to arrest her, getting the camera footage from the store and even bringing me down to help him fill out paperwork. I have more stories about entitled people, but this was the most recent. I've tackled a lot of entitled individuals. Update on the Karen. She was charged $500 for petty theft and was banned from the store permanently. Story 3. This happened in 2012. At the time, a 38F and my son 11M were on medication for ADHD. I had been on this medication for maybe 2 years, prior to which I had been on a different medication for years, but didn't like the withdrawal symptoms at the end of each day. I switched to the new medication, and it has worked great for me ever since. My son had only been on it for a few weeks. I started to notice that on certain days, it didn't feel like I had taken my pill. I was on 60 mg/day, and my son was on 20 mg/day. My son was adjusting, and his behavior and focus seemed worse at times. Eventually, I stopped that medication because I realized it wasn't working for him. But that's not really relevant to this. I began thinking I was forgetting to take my pill. So, I'd count the pills, and sometimes it seemed like I was one short. However, I couldn't be sure as I might have filled the prescription a day before I was actually out. I often asked my son how he felt taking this medication, and he felt conflicted for multiple reasons. One day after asking this, he said he didn't feel like he was even on the medication. I inquired deeper, and it seemed we were both experiencing the same thing. This medication is in capsule form, so I decided to start opening capsules to see if they were filled to the same level. Some capsules were full, some were filled halfway, and some even lower. All these variations were in both our medications. So, I'm confused but think maybe there's a reason for this. I'm not naive, but I'm not jumping to conclusions. So, I decided to go to my pharmacy and ask. I get to the consultation window, and the pharmacist is on the phone. I know he's the pharmacist because pharmacies have the picture of the pharmacist displayed. The pharmacy tech is next to him, presumably filling prescriptions. I don't know exactly because the first thing that grabs my attention is that the pharmacist, while on the phone, can't stop moving. Have you ever seen someone on illegal substances? I have. Background: many years ago, I had tried quite a few substances. I had a colorful life, if you will, so I'm no stranger to recognizing this sort of behavior. I was instantly filled with rage. Now I know my questions are about to be very different than I had thought. I'm honestly glad he was on the phone for about 5 minutes so I could collect myself internally and think about how to approach this situation. I'm certain at this moment he is the reason our medications vary in volume so wildly. He gets off the phone and greets me. I'm not confrontational, and I certainly have never created a scene in public. I'm quite laid back. So, I present both bottles of medication to him and explain how it felt wildly varied from day to day to the point that some days it felt like I hadn't taken the meds at all. His response is that it is an issue to take up with the manufacturer. Now I'm saying this calmly and quietly. I want to read reactions. I see the pharmacy tech side eye me several times. I see her getting visibly nervous. His response further irritated me, so I said, still remaining calm but slightly louder, that I, in fact, opened the capsules to check on mine and my son's current bottles, and I firmly believe that someone here is tampering with our meds. I swear the color in his face drained instantly. He couldn't make eye contact. He's still twitching and fidgeting hard. The pharmacy tech also went from nervous to shocked. I'm so livid that I want to commit a serious crime. he says, with his head hanging low, no eye contact, that I'll have to call the manufacturer of this medication. And he provides me with the 800 number. I think I said something else, but I'm blind with rage at this point, so I go home. This is malicious compliance. Tell me to take it up with the manufacturer, okay? Then I will. So, I've never in my life called a corporate office to complain about service or anything. Get the wrong order off Amazon? Guess I'm giving that away. Food order wrong. Well, that sucks, but I'm going to do nothing about it. Why? I'm terrible at adulting, and it's too much effort for small inconveniences. This, however, is my son's medication, also mine, but I'm not as concerned about myself. So I call this number, and I'm not hopeful at all, and I figure it's 10 minutes of my time. Oh, how wrong I was. Dear listeners, this phone call lasted 45 minutes to an hour. First, I quickly realized this was a cover your assets line of questioning. So at first, I feel like this is a waste of my time. And of course, pharmaceutical companies don't care. This lady is interrogating me as though I've committed a serious crime. She's asking me many repeated questions but worded in different ways. I explain to her I have no complaints about the medication itself. It has worked so well for me. I tell her everything I've written here but in much greater detail. And then she asks more questions in a similar interrogation style based specifically on my accusations against this pharmacist and tech. At some point during this, I started to feel that they were taking this very seriously even though they were still covering their butt. I insisted throughout that I was certain the pharmacist, and at least that one tech were tampering with or stealing our meds. So I'm internally filled with rage for days, and I obviously changed pharmacies. A couple of months later, when it was time for another refill, my new pharmacy and others in my area did not have my meds available. Over the years with this particular medication, there are times that pharmacies don't have it on hand. Guess which pharmacy did have it on hand? So I said forget it and hoped for the best. By this time, I had stopped this medication for my son as it wasn't right for him. I go to pick it up, and there's a new pharmacist. In fact, the entire staff is unrecognizable. The nice man gets me my prescription, and I say, "So, you've got a new pharmacist?" "Huh?" he says. "Yeah, actually, well, everyone had to be replaced because there were some issues." I was grinning from ear to ear, and I almost told him I knew exactly why, but instead, I just walked away feeling very satisfied. Obviously, I know they all lost their jobs, but I don't know what else happened. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who had their meds stolen like this, but I don't know if anyone else confronted them or called. Judging by their reactions when I confronted them, I'm certain I was the first. Does anyone know how pharmacies are investigated in a case like this? This happened in Indiana. Edit to clarify. I feel like I should add a few things that I didn't want to touch on. My body is quite accustomed to ADHD meds. So when my meds were shorted in milligrams per day, it meant that it was just ineffective for me. For my 11-year-old son, who has always been skinny and lanky, there was a profound and heartbreaking effect. Straight away, this was solved within a week after I abruptly took him off those meds. A combination of reasons. One, having his meds be a different milligram every day, possibly not the right meds regardless. But these meds have to be consistent, especially for a young child who had recently started taking them. My son was a sweet, loving, affectionate boy. While this was going on, he'd go from sobbing to angry to violent to feeling great and focused and doing better in school. I, of course, contacted his doctor, who reassured me before I knew our meds were tampered with. Then he tried to harm himself, so I immediately stopped those meds and got professional help for him. I have great guilt over this, but my now 19-year-old son is doing great and is his sweet, loving, affectionate self. And that time is a distant memory, although still very painful. So I decided that I should include that because what those people did literally almost killed my son. So when I say I was filled with rage and contemplating violence towards those people, this is why. I didn't want to include it because it is so painful to relive.